Hello and welcome to episode 50 of Life is Horror. In today's episode, I will be reviewing Cuckoo and Trap, and also doing my biggest ranking that I believe I've ever done, and that is my top 50 favorite slashers of all time. With a little asterisk there, there's gonna be like rules and things that I left out that would have made the list if I was doing it more like legit, like these are my top 50. But I wanted my list to be more interesting, so I made rules. I cut things for reasons, and I'll get into all that stuff later on. And this is a ranking that was very much inspired. I have to give credit, for where I got this idea, and that is the Exploding Heads Horror Podcast. They've been a podcast for about a decade almost. I think they started in 2015, 16, and I've been listening to them for the last 5 years almost. And for their 50th episode, they did this list, and they also had a bunch of rules, things that didn't qualify for certain reasons, and I'm going to go over those. I'm sticking to basically 90% of the rules they set up, with one exception. I'll get into that later. But yeah, I'm following the rules that they set up for their rankings, with the exception of one. And I'll explain all of that later on so you understand why there's going to be some movies missing from my list. Because if I go through my list without explaining this shit, I'll probably get a few comments like, well, where was this movie? Or why was there only one movie from this franchise? And I'll get into that later. But yeah, so if you haven't heard of that podcast, I highly recommend them. They're entertaining. Exploding Heads horror movie podcasts. And so that's what I'm doing here too. I'm copying them. Top 50 slashers of all time. And also reviewing two movies. I believe I already said that, Cuckoo and Trap. So I guess let's just. Oh, and of course, can't forget updates. What has been announced in the last few weeks since my last episode that I dropped, and there's been a few sequels announced every episode. It will never end. Every week you can expect a new sequel to be announced, and we've got a few of them. So starting with Crawl 2. That's right. It's been 5 years since the first Crawl. Alexandre Aja is coming back to direct a sequel to Crawl. As far as I know, maybe that'll change, but I believe Sam Raimi is producing this one as well. And it's going to be set in New York City. So I'm curious what that's going to look like. Is it going to be like the same premise but just different setting? Like, because the first one was a house flooding. Is this going to be a skyscraper flooding? Like, what? Or is there not going to be any water involved at all? It's just going to be alligators on land. Like, I don't know exactly what this is going to look like. I just know that it's supposedly set in New York City. I forget who reported that, so I can't give you my source, but I read it somewhere. So just, you gotta take my word for it. New York City, another sequel in New York City. Seems to be a trend. Scream, Quiet Place, Jason Takes Manhattan. Who else has done it? They all seem to keep. Sharknado, most of them. But so, and another sequel, In a Violent Nature 2. I'm not surprised to hear this one. I was kind of shocked with Crawl 2 because it's been 5 years and that was a movie that ended perfectly. It didn't really set up more. Actually, you know what? I think it did. Scratch that from the record. It did end with a shot of like alligator eggs cracking open. So typical ending. But I don't know why it took 5 years for that to finally get announced. But this one, I was not surprised. In A Violent Nature 2, that became a quick, cult classic. A lot of people loved it or hated it. And the people who hated it all hated it for the same reason, I think. The third act, atrocious, right? Um, so yeah, I wasn't surprised by this news at all. And same crew that's going to be working on this one worked on the first one. As far as I know, same director, same writer, Chris Nash. And I don't have a release date yet, but I would imagine it's going to come out probably at the earliest next October or sometime in 2026. Hopefully, this time they give us more kills, not just one great one and then a couple of off-camera ones. I was not very impressed with the kills in the last movie, so hopefully they up the body count in the sequel and give us more of that yoga kill, not just one great standout kill, but a few. And a better third act. That would be nice, right? And another thing, The Collected, the third movie in the Collector series. It was shot for about 2 weeks, about 5 years ago or so. Then I think COVID shut down the production and then never got back in production. And then there was like legalities for legal reasons. Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunstan couldn't resume shooting. And I'm curious if they're going to be able to keep some of that footage they shot or scrap it and start from scratch. I don't know. Tom Atkins was supposed to be in it before. I love the guy. I would hope that they can still keep him in this movie. So hopefully he can come back still 5 years later. Um, so yeah, that's all I know about that movie. It's that it's coming, still coming, and it's legally now allowed to start shooting. I don't know when they're gonna start shooting. Hopefully soon. So, um, yada yada, and that's it. All right, so let's jump into the reviews. All right, here we go. This is the right page. All right, so let's talk about Cuckoo. So this is a new horror movie, who by Tillman Singer. This movie, it says, after reluctantly moving to the German Alps with her father and his new family, Gretchen discovers that their new town hides sinister secrets as she's plagued by strange noises and frightening visions of a woman pursuing her. A woman in big old sunglasses and red beady eyes. You've seen the trailer, right? Um, just assuming you have. And if you've seen the trailer, you know that this movie is, like the title suggests, it's cuckoo. But this movie's crazy. It's crazier than the commercial or trailer showed. It's 10 times more, crazier than that. This is a big what the fuck movie. It's just one WTF moment after another for the first like hour, just constantly like head scratch moment after head scratch moment. Like literally, it just the whole time I was like, what is going on? I don't understand this. And then even when they started explaining shit in the last 30 minutes, I was like, I still don't quite understand everything here. It's a bizarre, original, mad scientist horror movie, really. And it just has you scratching your head, asking questions the whole time. Answers some of them, but still left me with some unanswered questions at the end. It feels like a movie that was kind of like trying very hard to be unique, and it was just throwing all kinds of shit at the wall, seeing if what will stick. Some of it did, some of it did not, and I was confused about the timeline, like when this movie takes place, because there's a lot of old-fashioned stuff, technology, the set designs, some of the style of hair and clothing. Like it seems kind of 80s. But then I swore there was a moment where I saw the main character, Gretchen, holding a cell phone. But maybe I was just automatically assuming that what she had in her hand was a cell phone. I don't know. What was it? I swear she had a cell phone at one point. So then that made me confused for the rest of the movie when everything was just shouting like 80s and 70s. I was like, what? Didn't she have a cell phone? But I don't know. What it never tells you at the beginning. Like they don't timestamp it, so I don't know what year it is, but I swear I saw a cell phone. But I'm going to have to assume that I'm full of shit. My eyes were lying to me. I saw something that was not there. So maybe that was something else in her hand. But yeah, she does a lot of talking on the phone in this movie. Gretchen, there's a good majority of the movie where she's just constantly like on a phone, leaving voicemails to her dead mother. It's not a spoiler, trust me. You'll know right away. She's talking to her dead mom. She calls her mom to hear her voicemail so she can hear her voice. I feel like I've seen that in other movies before. It's sad, but it's repetitive. It's like every 5 minutes she's leaving a new voicemail. Like, I just want to go home, mom. She's a real crybaby. And then now I'm seeing like everyone, and by everyone I mean one person, but I just assume when there's one, you know, horror news outlet like Bloody Disgusting, and someone's saying like she's the best final girl and she's so strong and clever, and I'm like, really? Like she's not that badass of a final girl. She's just crying the entire movie to her dead mom. But not to take away from her character, like her acting or anything. I thought the acting was great, and she does have a couple glimpses of badass moments when she has to defend herself at the end. Like, I'm not saying she doesn't do anything smart. I'm just saying like people are making her sound like she's Ripley, an alien, an alien's like she's some badass. It's like, no, calm down, calm down your rhetoric, all right? But she did a great job. The acting is great. I like Dan Stevens in this movie, even if his European accent wasn't always convincing to me. But I liked his character. The screeching sounds were really annoying, And and this movie has the box checked with a gay character in it, and I don't have anything wrong with that. I just hate when they force something like a relationship between characters that I don't believe. Like, I swear Gretchen and this woman just exchanged like two words with each other, and then they cut to a scene of them making out, and I'm literally like in the theater like, wait, where did this come from? What did I miss? Like, they just look at each other, say two words, and boom, they're making out. And then that character just disappears for a good majority of the film. It just felt like a character that was shoehorned in. Like, they're meeting someone's demand. Like, you have to have this kind of character in the movie, and they have to make out. And even if it's not believable at all, like, I just did not buy it. It wouldn't matter if that was a guy kissing her. I would still be here like, I didn't see anything between them. I said the same thing in other movies before, time and time again. It's something that is a pet peeve of mine when I'm watching a movie and two characters are like madly in love with each other out of nowhere, despite it not being properly written and set up and believable to me. It's just like, hey, how are you? Let's fuck. Okay. Like, is it really that easy? I wish it was that easy in real life, that I could just walk up to a woman or a guy and just be like, hey, wanna go fuck? Sure. Like, is it that easy? Because these movies keep making it look like it's that easy. I did not see any chemistry between them, and then all of a sudden they're making out. And then she just disappears. Oh, it got on my nerves. That and the screeching sounds. There's a lot of screeching sounds because of what they're doing, the experiments, the whole cuckoo thing, and this woman that's pursuing her just keeps make screeching real loud and for minutes on end, and it's just like, goddamn. And there's a lot. This movie felt like that it was directed by the guy who did like Killing of a Sacred Deer. I don't know how to say his name. It's like a Greek name. But if you told me this movie was directed by him and written by him, I would believe it because it felt like his kind of movie. Like just the awkwardness between the character, like the main character, and like how she behaves, just how she presents herself and how she like talks to her family, and how other people are talking, like Dan Stevens, the things he says, and she's pointing out the weird things. It's in the trailer. Her like, you don't think that's weird? Like, there's a lot of weird, awkward moments in the movie, and that just seems to be a staple of Yorgo, or whatever the hell his name is, who did Poor Things, Dogtooth, The Lobster. Like, he makes those all kinds of awkward movies, and this felt like a movie by him, but it's not. But yeah, I thought it was good, just not great. The pacing was great, but the movie itself was not that great. Mainly, I just wasn't that into it because I was too confused and still confused about some things I won't spoil, but there's something that happens a few times in the movie that's, by the end, it seems unexplained unless I missed it through all that exposition. There's a few scenes where there's just a big expository, like just exposition dump, and I'm still scratching my head by the end of it. Um, yeah, but what's that? If you've seen the movie, you should know what I'm talking about. There's something that happens. I don't want to say specifically in case you haven't seen what it is. It's a big what the fuck moment. It happens quite a few times throughout the movie with, involving repetition. I don't know. I want to give you a clue. But what is that? What is causing that? What was the explanation that I missed? I really want to know. I want to know. So tell me, what was causing that? And what's the explanation? I don't know. I just really don't get the whole purpose of this mad scientist, what they're trying to do here. And so I'll just leave it at that before I spoil too much. But I feel like you watch the trailer, you see the craziness and the whole, Dan Stevens is clearly a bad person. He's got the shotgun in the trailer, and looks like they're in some kind of like hospital or laboratory. So it's going to be some kind of crazy mad scientist type film. But that's all I'll say. So what do I give Cuckoo? Well, I will give it a 3.5 out of 5. Good, just not great. It's original, I'll give it that, but just kind of left me scratching my head and wanting more. It's very light on scares too and violence, very minimal blood and gore and jump scares. So it's just mainly a lot of WTF moments, and then exposition, and then a little bit of heart and emotion. I did like the chemistry between her and her half sister or stepsister, half sister, her half sister. Like that stuff was good, but yeah, I just wanted more from this movie than I got. So next movie will be, what is it? Trap. M. Night Shyamalan's Trap. Now I went into this movie. It's funny. I would have expected liking the movie I just talked about more than this one, because that watching the trailer for that movie, I was like, that seems like my kind of movie. It looks really weird, and some of the headlines I was reading made it sound more like my kind of movie, more crazy, or like more violent. They were acting like they seem to keep doing that with every movie. Like, this is going to be a bloody, wild, hilarious movie. I don't. It's not hilarious. It's just awkward. I wasn't laughing at it. I was just kind of going, huh, that's weird. It wasn't hilarious, and it wasn't very bloody. So don't listen to everyone saying that it's not true. But I was expecting to like that more than Trap, and I wasn't expecting to hate Trap or anything. I was just like, Trap seems like it's a pretty straightforward movie from the trailer. Doesn't seem like it's gonna be. There's not gonna be any surprises hidden up its sleeve or anything. It's gonna be pretty straightforward, basic. Probably be like a 2.5, 3 out of 5 movie. But no, I actually enjoyed this movie quite a bit. It's another M. Night Shyamalan movie that succeeds at being a fun a thrill ride. And this is more of a thriller than a horror movie, but it deals with a serial killer who's the main character. So he's like an anti-hero. He's the bad guy, but you kind of root for him at first, because he's so like charming. He's got a lot of charisma, and I love the performance by Josh Hartnett in this. I thought he was phenomenal. But, he's the bad guy, so you can't really root for him, but you find yourself sometimes kind of rooting for him until you learn the details about his crimes and things he's done in the past. You're like, oh, no, he's a piece of shit. But, yeah, it's just a very tight, fast paced, suspenseful thriller that had me engaged throughout. I was like, holy shit, I'm really into this. And there were some surprises. It's an M. Night film that has not really a twist at the end, but just some surprises. It went in places I didn't think. Like, I thought this whole movie was just going to be this arena the whole time, but it goes into other places sooner than you would think. And there's just some nice reveals. And I was like, oh, I didn't see that coming. And the actress who plays the main killer, his I forget his name, but Josh Hartnett, his wife, uh, and even his daughter, thought they were great too. But Josh Hartnett stole the show. He was awesome. It's one of those movies where it feels like it's over multiple times. Like you feel like it's about to wrap up, but then you're like, wait, no, there's still like so much more left, and then you feel like it's over again and again and again. It's like, oh wait, no, there's still a lot more happening after that scene. And I mean, you do have to suspend disbelief. Like there's tons of like little like conveniences. Like, oh well, what if that didn't happen, or what if this person didn't do what this person wanted them to do? And it's like you just have to look past it. But it does happen quite a few times where it's like, all right, it's getting a little unbelievable. Um, some of the side characters were ridiculous. Like there was a mom, like some angry mom, some like 50-year old like soccer mom who was just over the top. I thought that should have been dialed down. She was a little too much for me. It's like, okay. The singer, I believe she's really a singer, and she wrote like a whole album. I heard like every song you hear in this movie was written for the movie, so that was interesting. And she was okay in moments, but there were some other moments where I didn't think she was all that convincing when she was supposed to be like more panicky, or it's just I didn't buy it in some scenes. So um overall it's a quite enjoyable just cat and mouse chase, and him trying to escape, and he's just constantly on the run from the cops. And of course M. Night Shyamalan has to have a little cameo in this movie. And there's a post-credit scene. Stick around for that. It was awesome, perfect. I love that they threw that in there. And that's all I'll say. So yeah, I really enjoyed Trap quite a bit. So this was a surprise. I was not expecting it to be this engaging and fun, but it was. So Trap, I will give a 4 out of 5. It's a great movie, and probably top 5 M Night. I already did a ranking for M Night Shyamalan's movies, mainly just his horror movies. So I left out like the Avatar movie he did, like Lady in Water. I haven't even seen that movie, but of his horror movies and thrillers, I did a ranking for those, and this I would have to say is probably like my number 4 or 5. I would still put like Sixth Sense and Signs and Unbreakable above this, and then after that you got like this movie and Old and Split, like kind of competing for that 4 and 5 spot. You know, so yeah, I really liked it. Let me know what you guys thought. Seems like this movie is kind of meh for a lot of people. The rating, the IMDb and Letterbox average seems to be like a lot of 3 out of 5s and 2.5s. But I just was really into it, so that's all I care about. If the movie can keep me engaged, just keep me entertained. Give me one great character who I can root for, or I guess in this case, you're not supposed to root for him, but I still kind of did in some moments. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. So 4 out of 5, Trap, check it out. And that's all for that. I guess we can jump into the big ass ranking. Now, I gotta establish some things. So, Exploding Heads, when they did this ranking, they talked extensively about, what is a slasher? What are the rules? What are we going to knock off the list? And why? And so, I'm going to go over that. But there's one thing that I changed from their list, and that is I'm going to limit myself to one movie per franchise. On their list, they had like 6 or 7 Friday the 13th movies on their list. And if I did what they did, well, half of my list would be franchise films. You'd have, 6 or 7 Friday the 13th. You'd have 3 or 4 Halloweens. You'd have a couple of Nightmare on Elm Streets. You'd have a couple of this, a couple of that, this franchise. And then it's like, well, and then there'd just be this many standalone slasher films. And that's how their list was. It was like almost half their list was franchise films. So I wanted to make this list just more interesting than that. Not to take anything away from their list. They still had quite a few. Like I said, it was about half of their list. Some more than others. There's 3 of them that did this ranking. But I just wanted to avoid that and just say, you know what? All those movies are basically the same. Like Friday the 13th, they're all the same movie. So why not just put them together as one in one spot so I can save room for other movies that deserve to be highlighted, to give a shout out to these movies that deserve it and wouldn't get a shout out if I was just putting all these sequels on the list, just clogging it with that. So if I'm going to have a Friday the 13th movie or a Nightmare on Elm Street or a Halloween, this or that, I'm just going to pick my favorite one to represent and say that all the other ones I love that would have been on this list also with it, they can just go in that spot with it. You know what I mean? Just put them all there because they're essentially the same movie with just little differences. They're the same story, so why not just count them as one big movie in one spot? You know what I'm saying? So that's the one difference from their list. Now, what I'm taking from their rules also that I agree with is I'm not going to include films like giallo, or gialli is the plural in Italian. Gialli, those Italian murder mysteries, Argento, Fulci, Bava. I'm not going to include those movies because those are more murder mystery detective movies, and that's a little different from a slasher. I mean, just because there's someone with a knife killing people, but the focus is on these cops the whole time, that doesn't feel. It's all about, I guess, your own personal interpretation of what is a slasher, what feels like a slasher. It could have 1 or 2 elements of a slasher, but does that make it a full-blown slasher? Not to me. So I agree with them. I don't want to put these slasher-esque gialli films on my list. So you're not going to see Deep Red, you're not going to see Don't Torture a Duckling, you're not going to see Blood and Black Lace or A Bay of Blood. Sorry, it's just not happening. Another thing, they left off the entire Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Final Destination and Child's Play franchise off their list. Actually, scratch that. One of them put Curse of Chucky on their list because he said it felt more slashery out of the whole franchise. I'll disagree. So I'll say No killer doll movies, no killer dolls, no killer puppets, no killer families. To me, a slasher movie should be one person, or if there's two people or three, that's a reveal. That's like a surprise. Scream, for instance, that's a reveal. You think there's one person, but then boom, there's two. If you know from jump that there's just multiple people, like I feel like killer family movies should just be their own genre. Like you got slashers, and then you got killer families, and then there's serial killer movies, and that's another tricky one. Like you look at movies like American Psycho or Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, and so on and so on. Like there's a lot of those, like Christmas Evil movies that are like psychological horror, but also slasher esque in a way because they're slashing, stabby, stabby, whatever. But if it's so just one person, we're just focused on the killer, and it just seems more like a psychological, or it's just it's like again, it's just like what does it feel like to you? Does it feel like a slasher, or does it feel like just a psychological horror, like serial killer movie? So they left off movies like the ones I just said: American Psycho, Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, Christmas Evil, you name it. But there is one exception: Maniac. They included that in the remake on their list, and since they did that, I felt comfortable doing it too because when you watch Maniac, it feels like a slasher because I guess the kills and how they're done, like I don't know, for some reason you put Maniac next to Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer or American Psycho, which one seems more like a slasher? Maniac does to me. So that's the one exception I will make, just like they did. So because they put it on their list, I'm gonna do it too. So I'll put Maniac on here. But other serial killer movies, psychological horror films like that, where it's just like you're in the mind of the killer, not gonna put them on there except for Maniac. No group killers, no killer families, no cannibals. So Texas Chainsaw Massacre, uh, the original, because some of them don't have the whole family. Like the new Netflix movie, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or Texas Chainsaw 3D, it was just Leatherface. So that to me is more of a slasher than the rest. So maybe those could make my list. I won't spoil it if they did, but I'm just telling you right now, those two movies are slashers in that franchise. The rest are not. They're just cannibalistic, killer family movies. Um, and home invasions. You got movies like You're Next and The Strangers, masked killers. You think of masked killers, you think of slashers. But if it's a home invasion movie and you just got, you know, and there are multiple people all the time, it's never really just one person doing a home invasion. It's always a group in these horror movies. So again, not including Your Next, not including The Strangers, or any home invasion premise. To me, a slasher should just be them going somewhere else and then like one location getting stuck, trapped in, or whatever. you know it's just, or getting, or babysitting kids, or taking a haunted swamp tour, or like, but having a home invasion, like I don't know, that just doesn't feel slashery to me. So that's another one I bumped off. Final Destination did not make the list because a slasher, you should be able to see the killer. Death, invisible, that just doesn't feel like a slasher to me. But it kind of has that premise of young people getting bumped off in creative ways one by one. Yeah, it's got that from the slasher template, but it doesn't check it doesn't check all the boxes or enough for me to say Final Destination is a slasher. It just isn't. So, and or unhuman killers. Now they can be supernatural, like Freddy, Candyman. I don't consider Candyman a slasher just because of how those movies play out, how they feel. Again, it's all about the feels. They don't feel like slashers. So Candyman's not gonna make my list, but someone like Freddy Krueger, that feels more like a slasher. He's technically human, but he's supernatural. But when I say unhuman, I mean like creatures. Like if there's a Sasquatch, Bigfoot, you know, who just so happens to have like a machete, he's chopping people up. I don't give a fuck. I'm not counting it. All right, I don't want unhuman killers like that. They have to be somewhat human. Like Freddy Krueger or whatever. It used to be human, but like just that's I don't want creatures or unhuman like alien like beings on my list. So those were knocked off also, and I think that's about it. I mean, let me see. Yeah, I think that's about it. So I mainly just stuck with movies that felt the most like something like Halloween, Friday the 13th, The Burning, stuff like that. Like what has that template to a T or close? You know, what checks enough boxes for me to consider a slasher? What has one killer or one kill, or you think it's one killer and then it's revealed that there's multiple. You know, I just those are the exceptions I made for this movie. So those are the rules. I hope you understand it. So with that being said, let's and another thing they did was just before they started their ranking was tell you how many movies from each decade made their list. So just thought that would be a fun little thing to do here. You might be surprised by some of these numbers. Now keep in mind they made their list in 2017, so there's been plenty of great slashers between then and now that aren't going to be on their list, and so with that, I think my list is going to be better. Because of that, my list is going to be better than theirs. I'm going to have movies that have come out since their list that they didn't have, so therefore my list is going to be best. All right, I'm going to say that right now. My list is awesome, way better than theirs. So three movies. I'm just teasing. Where am I? I think I got the better list. 3 movies from the 70s, just 3, and 22 from the 80s. I think they all had like at least 25 from the 80s, so I'm close to them. 3 movies from the 90s, 6 from the 2000s, 11 from the 2010s, and 5 from the last 4 years. So, yeah, there you go. Now let's jump into the list. All right, I'm not going to talk about these movies because this video is long enough, and I want to say I reviewed almost every single movie on this list, so you can just check out my thoughts there. I'll try to go as fast as I can here. No promises. So, number 50, just made it. And honorable mentions before I get into my top 10. So, between my 10, 11, and 10, that's when I'll do honorable mentions. So, Killer Party just made the cut because I cut a film out last second, which they did too. The same movie, Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker. This movie made it because that one got kicked off last second. Why? Because Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker, aka Night Warning, reviewed that movie too. Great movie, but doesn't feel like a slasher until the third act. The first 2 acts are very different. It's a very different kind of movie. It does not feel like a slasher until way late in the game. So that's the only reason why I pulled it and then made room for this movie. This movie, biggest fault for this one, MPAA. Fuck them. This movie could have been great. It could have been much more popular had they not fucked with it. It's unfortunate. Number 39, nostalgic pick. Had to put it on the list. Not a great movie, but it's just corny as hell. I really enjoy it. Drive Through, Killer Clown. Rips off a lot of elements from 80s slashers like Happy Birthday to Me, Nightmare on Elm Street, but it's enjoyable. Maniac Cop 2. So one of the 3 hosts of Exploding Heads put this on their list. The other 2 took issue with it because of the whole gun thing. If people are getting killed with guns, is it a slasher? And I would say, well, just because there's a couple of gun kills shouldn't disqualify it. You got a shotgun kill in Maniac, but those other 2 people put it on their list. You know, in this movie, you see in the poster there, he does have a knife in his nightstick. He has a knife, and he strangles people and breaks necks and shit. And he's basically like a Jason Voorhees zombie walking around. So it feels enough like a slasher to me to put on the list. And I've only seen it twice, but this is probably the best of the trilogy. This and 3 are much more enjoyable than part 1. I kind of go back and forth to 2 and 3. They're both very. I know a lot of people hate 3, but I think it's underrated. 2 and 3 are very enjoyable. Check them out if you haven't seen them. And number 40, or yeah, 48, is this the one I'm on now? Whatever. I'm not going to count because I don't have numbers assigned to these, so I have no idea what number I'm on right now. So, You Might Be the Killer. This is an interesting spin on a slasher. Plays out differently. It's a different perspective. Like, the main character might be the killer, and then it does like flashback. We see events play out from different perspectives, and it's very interesting. And it's got the guy from Cabin in the Woods, the girl from American Pie, and she's great. She's like the Randy character in Scream, almost exactly. I think she works at a movie store, and she's very Randy, but much better than Randy, much better actress, and I wish she was my girlfriend. This is my type right here. She's awesome. And yeah, get a couple of gory kills. I have not reviewed this movie, so that's why I'm talking about it a little bit more. Um, the mask, it just looks like that character from like Ed and Eddie or whatever it was, a plank of wood. It's kind of a lame mask, but I really liked the whole premise of this movie. I thought it was fresh. So check it out. And number 36, Popcorn. I've seen this movie twice now. Got the Blu-ray from Vinegar Syndrome. This is a messy film. That's why it's so low on the list. But I just love the location, the who the killer is, and like what they're doing. With the masks and the whole like movies within the movie were cool and corny, and but I just feel like there's potential that was lost here. Like this movie has so much potential for better kills, higher body count, but it was just unfortunate that only a couple of people die, two people the same way, and there's like supernatural elements that come out of nowhere and then are never back in the movie again, and it's never explained. It's a messy movie for sure, but it's still entertaining. Number 35, The Last Matinee. Let's put these two movies back to back, kind of on purpose. One movie theater slasher next to another. This one's also set in a movie theater, and you got this. It's kind of like shot and feels like a giallo because the killer's like wearing these black gloves and he's got like the black jacket and the hood. But you get some gory sequences here and there. Visually, beautiful to look at times, and I don't remember too much about it because I've only seen this movie once. It was a couple years back, so I can't say too much about it. But it was on Shudder for a long time. I'm not sure if it's still there, but if it is, I recommend checking it out. It's not great. Again, could have used a couple more kills here and there. So, Last Matinee, all through the house. This is a movie that at first I was kind of lukewarm on, but I've seen it a few more times since. I think I've seen this movie like 3 times now. It's kind of become like a Christmas annual watch. So, and this movie has a high body count, lots of gore. It's got some influences that, like sleepaway camp influences towards the end. I'm not saying it ends with a dude with a vagina or a chick with a dick or anything like that movie, but there's some crazy characters and a reveal that kind of feels like it was inspired by sleepaway camp in a way. And the motivation for the killer, like this guy's going around mutilating bodies with hedge clippers and chopping penises off, stabbing women in their breasts with the hedge clippers. Like this movie's brutal and it's darkly funny. And I reviewed this movie too. So why am I talking about it? I reviewed it, so check out my review. Next up, Dr. Giggles. This movie went up on rewatch. I just rewatched it in the last week or two for this ranking, and it's a good thing I did because it would not be on my list if I did not. It was like a 3 out of 5 the first time. It went up on rewatch. It's a bigger budgeted slasher movie than most at the time. This came out in the early 90s when slashers were kind of dying, but this one had a pretty decent budget, and you can see that when you watch it. The lighting and multiple locations, some of the sets, the backlighting, some decent kills, decent amount of gore, just not as much. Again, it's probably an MPAA thing, but the whole opening title card, the credits inside the body, like going through the veins and all the blood, like that was interesting. And they could have gone way over the top with this, but I feel like they were a little bit more reserved. Like it's called Dr. Giggles, so you automatically suspect that you're gonna get this annoying, over the top Freddy-esque killer who's just constantly cackling. But no, like his laugh is not annoying to me, and he doesn't do it that often, thank God. And his backstory and what he does to get away as a kid, it's pretty fucked up. Awesome to see. And so yeah, check out Dr. Giggles. This is a pretty fun movie. If I had to critique anything about it, I would say, like I said, I just could have used. There's a couple of cutaway kills in the movie. All the kills weren't that great, but there was some cool practical effects. There's a like moment where he sticks something like all the way up this woman's nose, and they built like a fake head for it, but it was like an animatronic head, and it looked pretty convincing. It was pretty cool. So and he's got a giant band-aid that he tapes someone to the wall with. It's got some corny moments like that, but it doesn't go too far over the top for me. And so yeah, not too much to complain about, but it's an underrated 90s slasher. It's one of the best from the early 90s. There wasn't a whole lot that was good at that time. You had like Jason Goes to Hell and what else? Ice Cream Man. This one stands way above those. And I would argue Jason Goes to Hell is not even a slasher. Fuck that movie. April Fool's Day. I reviewed this movie, and there's something that's revealed in this movie, in case you still haven't seen it, but there's something that's revealed in this movie that almost makes me want to take it off my list. And if you've seen the movie, I think you'll know why. But it's still, for 90% of it, feels like a slasher. But then there's a reveal, and you're like, oh, well, is it technically a slasher if this is what's happening? Not really, but whatever. The whole journey to that reveal still feels like you're watching a whodunit slasher. So, and I love the poster. It's one of my favorite posters of all time. And next up, Sorority Row Remake. I've always been a fan of this one. It's got one of my favorite weapons that a slasher has ever had. Custom-made weapon. It's like a tire iron. That's been customized. It's got all kinds of like big ass knives on each end, and I don't even know what that is on the bottom part of it. But it's like some kind of like triple sided thing, like a ninja star. I don't know, but it's a cool ass weapon, and it's got a beautiful cast, and it's one of the earliest movies that I've reviewed on this channel. Drive Through and this one back when I first started my channel, and I've always preferred this one over the original, and the original almost made my list, but I decided this one deserves to be on the list more than that one, because I just think it's got better kills. But it's a better whodunit. I thought the original was pretty predictable, what was going on, who the killer was, yada yada, and just beautiful cast, and it's fun. And I heard that there might be a sequel. Might be a sequel on the way finally, 15 years later. Who knows? I hope that happens. So next up will be Nightmare Beach. Welcome to spring break. Oh yeah, this just reminded me of another rule. So Exploding Heads, they had another rule for their ranking. They said North American slashers only. So I did not go by that. So because of that, they couldn't put films on their list like Stitches from the UK or Charlie's Farm from Australia. But I did not go by that. So that's another thing that was different from my rules in there. So yeah, I just want to throw that out there. And this reminded me of that because this is like a co-production. I think they shot this movie in Florida, but the crew was like Italian. But one of them had this movie on their list, but the other two did not, because I think they thought it was an Italian slasher movie, but it's not. It's an Italian co-production film, from my understanding. So, but it is cheesy as hell. It's a lot of electrocution kills, but who cares? Just because there's not a knife being used in this movie, I think it still qualifies as a slasher. It's a nice whodunit, lots of gratuitous nudity, lots of fun, and just cheesy as hell. You got John Saxon in the movie. He's great. Plays a cop yet again. He's always a cop. And I reviewed this movie too. Next up, I reviewed this movie. And I remember seeing this movie at the theater. This is one of the earlier horror movies that I saw at a young age that I can remember. Back in 2006, 11 years old. Saw this at the theater with my mom and girlfriend at the time. First girlfriend, 11 years old. And it's kind of awkward watching a movie like this with your mom, if you know what happens in this movie with the killer and his mom. But yeah, another movie with a very attractive cast and lots of gore and creative kills, eyeball gougings, beautifully shot, cinematography is top notch in this movie. It's just a shame how far they went with the killer's backstory, how much they reveal. It was just too much. And I feel like the whole, the two killer thing was a mess. Like, it felt like it was supposed to be a reveal, but it wasn't, because I don't know what they were trying to do. Like, was that supposed to be a surprise when Agnes showed up? Because if so, they failed horribly. So that's my major critique on the film. It's just that could have been handled a lot better with some editing. Just take that beginning breakout sequence and place that somewhere else in the movie before that opening kill, and shoot certain death scenes a different way. You got one killer with blonde long hair and another one with short black hair and yellow skin. It's kind of easy to tell right away that there's two different killers. So, Black Christmas, I really enjoy that movie. Lots of nostalgia, but the Slumber Party Massacre, I I used to prefer part two over this one slightly, but this one it's kind of grown on me, and I enjoy it a little bit more now than I did on first watch. Another cheesy, corny slasher from the early '80s that I reviewed. So I guess I don't need to talk too much about it. Cool soundtrack, cool demise of the killer. I just wish some of the other kills were better. Too many jump scares, like fake outs. Too many fake outs in this movie. Way too much. Leprechaun Returns. No Leprechaun movie on their list, but this is the best of the franchise to me. This one in part three, but this one has way more gore and feels more, just a little bit more slashery than part three. Being, just the cast of characters, who they are, and the one setting, and the way they get picked off, very gruesome, over the top. And, you know, he's not really a human character, but I wouldn't say this is a creature feature. Like I said earlier, like no creature features, no unhuman, unless it's like Freddy. But this is basically a short Freddy. This is just a leprechaun. You could argue is not a slasher because it's a mythical. It's a creature. It's not human, but I just look at him as just a miniature Freddy Krueger. And if I'm gonna count Freddy Krueger, I'm gonna count Leprechaun. So this is the one I chose, and for good reason. It's easily the best. I don't think there's any arguing that. That is a bad franchise. But if you're gonna watch, if you haven't seen any of them, and I had to recommend one, it would be easily this movie. Check out Leprechaun Returns. And if you hate this movie, I guarantee you're gonna hate the rest. So next up is my favorite urban legend, the original. And as a kid, I remember seeing the second one the most. I actually owned that one on VHS. But watching part one on TV as a kid always gave me the creeps, and just the whole opening scene. I think the opening sequence of this movie is one of the best openings in horror. Like, it's almost up there with some of the greats that people always point to, like Scream or Halloween or whatever. Like, this is up there. I think this has a fantastic opening. Some creative death sequences, not gory. It's very light in the gore, but that's because of the time period. This is post Scream. Thanks, Scream, for that. But I really liked who the killer was, and cinematography. There's a lot of cool shots, a lot of crane shots in this movie. Take a drink for every crane shot there is. There's a lot. And yeah, I just like the look of the killer. It's, to me, just easily the best of the trilogy. And number 25, maybe? I don't know. I think I'm almost halfway there, but maybe not. 24, if I'm correct, is The Town That Dreads Sundown. Now, this one is arguable a sequel or a remake. I'm not going to get into that debate because I don't give a fuck. But we got a hooded slasher. Did I review this movie? I think I did. This one's definitely better than the original, but I still enjoy the original. But this one, tonally, the kills, again, cinematography, beautiful movie. There's a lot of cool shots, split diopter shots, very like De Palma-esque in moments. The only thing I did not like about this movie, I'm sure I said it in my review, is the Scream-esque ending. Did not like that. Just the last 10 minutes kind of shit the bed for me. And this movie would be much higher up if they stuck the landing in this movie. So that's unfortunate, but still a good movie. Happy birthday to me. Speaking of Scream, Scream ripped this movie off. The motivation at the end, the killer's motivation, it is directly lifted from Scream, and they pointed that out on Exploding Heads, and I agree with them. Yeah, it's total Scream. I wonder if Kevin Williamson saw this movie before he wrote Scream, because the motivation is practically identical for the killer. So, spoiler, in case you haven't seen this movie, 40 plus years later, 45 almost. Um, and 6 of the most bizarre murders you'll ever see. Yeah, creative kills, um, but just it's a little long, like Scream, and the pacing's not that great. Yeah, but I love the poster. This is another movie with a great poster, one of my favorite posters in horror. But yeah, I love the reveal. I love some of the kills. Love the giallo feelings, the black gloved killer, and I love that we get a character that fakes their death at the beginning when being strangled. Like that's never been done before, and I don't think it's been done since, which is surprising. That should be done more often. I feel like more movies need to do that. If you're being strangled and you know you're going to lose, you can't do anything to fight back. Just you're dead. Just pretend like you've been successfully strangled to death, and hope that they release their grip shortly after. You know, so I love that the character did that at the beginning of this movie. It's always been one of my favorite moments in the movie. Then the quick throat slash right after that. So next movie is Slaughter High. This is a movie that I wasn't too high on the first time. I don't remember what rating I gave it in my review when I first watched it 5 years ago. But this is a movie I've seen like 2 or 3 more times since. And I'm into it much more than I was the first time. But the only thing I don't like about it is the drawn out final chase in the reveal at the end. I feel like that was a cop out, but it doesn't make the journey there to that point any less enjoyable. It actually makes things make more sense on rewatch, some of the ridiculous things that happen, but it still feels like a cop out ending. And I like the jester mask, I like the outfit, I like the kills, gory, creative. Friday the 13th music, same composer, Harry Manfredini. Just don't like the third act. The third act kind of, it didn't stick the landing. Another one. Intruder. This is a movie where the first act is the biggest problem, and the rest of the movie is actually great. I loved this movie. Loved this movie when I first watched it back in 2020, like in January 2020. I watched this and I was blown away by the kills. And that is the best part of this movie is the kills. They are fantastic. Just watch this movie for the kills alone, but you might have to fast forward through the first 30 minutes because they're kind of boring and ridiculous. The dialogue, the acting, it's bad. But once you get to the kills, it just keeps going and you get a over the top fun chase through the store. I like the location. I like the killer. The performance by the killer just matches the tone of the movie, and you get people getting beaten with a severed head. Like, it's awesome. That stuff's awesome. But just that first act, it needed something else. An extra kill, better something. I don't know. It's just that first act just is a little hard to get through on rewatch, especially. Like the Mutilator. This is another one that I wasn't too high on the first time I watched it because I thought it was a little slow in moments, and the acting's pretty bad, and the dialogue's not that great either. But man, this is another one where the kills are fantastic, practical effects. You got a great special effects artist in this movie, Mark Shostrom, or however you say his name, and the kills just are awesome by sword, by pick, by axe, by like lots of different weapons being used, and the killer in the movie, the motivation, and like it's ridiculous as fuck. The killer is dreaming about killing people, and like it just it's and this movie's getting a sequel too. They already made it, but I don't know why it's not out yet. Like it went to festivals, I think. Like it was made a year or two ago. I heard about like over a year ago, but it's just not being released. Like when's that coming out? I want to see Mutilator 2. I heard that they're bringing back the Final Girl and same director, and like I want to see that. And I heard it's like a meta sequel or heard something like that. I don't know. But yeah, I'm curious to see what that is. But yeah, The Mutilator, another 80s classic. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's very cheesy. Oh, the opening sequence, another amazing opening, cheesy as hell, like unintentionally hilarious opening. Stitches. This movie made my list and not exploding hits because, like I said, they did not include foreign, not North American slashers. This is from the UK. This is just a very entertaining killer clown, supernatural killer clown movie like Terrifier, but not the same tone as Terrifier at all. This is much more silly. This is basically Freddy Krueger with a clown nose, and and very over the top kills, very creative. And I reviewed this movie too, so let's move on. I want to get through this quicker. Scream 4, my favorite Scream in the franchise, easily, without a doubt, the best one. If you don't like that, fuck off. I don't care. I don't get the hate for this movie. And that's not to say there's a lot of hate, because I feel like Scream fans, they blow every movie in this franchise. Like, they're all amazing, but I think half this franchise sucks. But this one is easily the best. Easily. And if you want to know why, check out my review. Happy Death Day, a goreless PG-13 slasher, but it made the list because I really enjoyed it for the main character, the performances, the writing, the whodunit. Even though I predicted it in the theater, but I still liked it. I still really enjoyed it. I love the premise too. I just love the Groundhog's Day premise and how it plays out. I just thought PG-13 does kind of hurt it. Like, if this was rated R, I'm sure this would probably be closer to top 15 easily. But unfortunately, it is what it is. They gotta make a lot of movies PG-13, especially if it's Blumhouse, for money reasons. That's usually the reason. More asses in the seats, yada yada. But still a good movie nonetheless. Girl House. And this is a movie that I've seen twice now. I don't think I've reviewed it, so I'll talk a little bit quickly about it. This is a movie where you got a computer loser, this loser who looks at, webcam, those porn sites where you look at live cam girls is what they call them. And one of them pisses him off and like blocks him or something. And so he like hacks their website, finds out what like mansion that they're all streaming from together, goes there to kill them all. And the mask he's wearing is kind of Leatherface-esque because it looks like a woman's face with long black hair, and he's like this big wrestler dude, so it's very off-putting, very creepy, and he's brutal. It's not very gory. There's tons of beautiful women, some nudity. Shockingly, though, there's not as much nudity as you would expect from a premise like this with these kinds of characters, cam girls. And the main actress in this movie doesn't even get naked. They purposely cut away every time when she's doing a live show. But this actress has shown her tits in other movies. She was in like the third American Pie movie and she got butt naked in that, but she won't get naked in this movie? That kind of pisses me off, but whatever. So check this movie out, underrated. And next movie is Hellfest. Reviewed this movie back in 2018. I think it's underrated, gets a lot of hate. Love the look of the movie, the setting. I'm a sucker for horror movies that take place in like a haunted, attraction, fun house, maze, whatever, stuff like this. And so yeah, just aesthetically love the movie. The like motiveless killer I thought was great. The mask, the score by Bear McCreary, one of my favorite composers working in horror today. Did the Child's Play remake. And so yeah, I recommend it. I think it gets too much hate, so if you haven't seen it because of that, ignore the haters and check it out for yourself. See what you think. Silent Night. Now, I include this movie, and some might be saying, well, hey, this movie's kind of like a giallo slasher because it focuses on cops. Yeah, but it's still a slasher. It's still a Santa in a mask butchering people, even kids, and he's got a flamethrower, putting people in wood chippers. Yeah, it focuses on cops, which isn't usually part of the slasher template. Usually it's kids, teenagers. When I say kids, I mean like 18 to 22-year-olds usually for slasher movies. But, this movie focuses more on cops, but the people who are getting killed are the people that you would see getting killed in slashers, with the exception of the kid. But I love that. Awesome. Electrocuted to death. That was ballsy for this movie. Not a lot of slashers kill kids for whatever reason. This one does, so gotta give them credit there. Some people might think I'm fucked up for wanting kids to die in slashers, but I know I'm not alone. Exploding heads, at least one of those three guys agrees with me. Right, Dave? Kill more kids in slashers. So, yeah, Silent Night, I reviewed this movie. with the whole franchise. It's easily the best since the original. Next up is The Burning, the original and only Burning. When's this movie going to get remade or get a sequel? I'm surprised this one never got that. Tom Savini effects, hit or miss, not some of his best work, but the raft sequence is iconic. You get, the basic slasher template here with the campground setting, Friday the 13th, campfire story, the whole, legend of Cropsey. I love it. I love all that stuff. The vibes that this movie gives, the gratuitous nudity, the fun characters, their dialogue, the way they just make fun of each other, slingshotting at each other's asses. It's just fun. It's a fun summer movie. I watch it almost every summer. And I reviewed it. So I reviewed this one. I reviewed Tourist Trap, and this is another one that has gone up on rewatch. First time I was kind of lukewarm on it, never hated it, but I was just like, yes. I've always been more of a fan of the first half of this movie. It's the second half that loses me a little bit, only because the killer starts talking too much. And the dialogue wasn't all that great. And it just went off the rails a little bit for me. It's a PG 1979 slasher and supernatural elements, definitely. You get that from the beginning, but I like it. It's very creepy. The use of mannequins in this movie, the score by Pino Donaggio, fantastic. And the mask, multiple masks too, kind of like Terror Train. So yeah, it's definitely slasher for me. Some people might disagree, but fuck it. I count it. And definitely worth checking out. It's a cult classic, and I heard recently that this was getting remade. I think I talked about that in an episode recently. Barbara Crampton's producing a remake for this movie, and I'll watch it definitely. I'm excited for that. Madhouse from 1981. I reviewed this movie, so I'll just move on to the next one. It's a birthday slasher. Happy birthday to me, slasher. The Funhouse. It was on one of the other three guys' list, at least one of them. Some would argue, well, isn't there, this is kind of like multiple killers. Not really, because it's one killer. He's like a mongoloid. He's just disfigured. So to me, this isn't a creature. This is a human being who just so happens to look like that. He's like a Victor Crowley, fucked up looking killer. So I don't feel like this movie is disqualified because you got one guy doing all the killing. Like the other guy in this movie, this dude's brother or his dad, or forget the Barker dude, the Carnival Barker. He doesn't kill anyone. If they were killing together throughout the movie, then I'd be like, it's not too much of a slasher movie, but I think it counts. I'll count it, and I love the atmosphere of this movie. Again, funhouse settings. I'm a sucker for this kind of setting in a horror movie, the aesthetics, and just the score of this movie, the opening credits. Love it. Love it. And Behind the Mask. I reviewed this movie. I've seen it about 3 times now. My only issue with the movie is just the third act. It should have brought the gore and the kills. Some people have explained that they did that on purpose because they were saving the kills and the gore for the sequel. Because that's what sequels do. So that was like their meta reason for being tame, because the original movie and slasher franchises are usually the more tame ones, and this movie was expecting to get sequels, so they were saving the gore for those movies. That's the explanation I've heard, but I don't care. I wanted the gore in this movie, damn it. But I love the premise, love the whole like found footage angle, like documentary that's set in the same world as Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, and Jason. Thought that was brilliant. Number 9. Well, not number 9. Number 9. This is number 19, I think. Hell Night. Another movie that went up on rewatch. Happens a lot with me, I realized. Sometimes the movie gets worse on rewatch, but sometimes I like movies more on rewatch because I know what to expect. And this one, it has some pacing issues, and this is another one with multiple 2 killers, but it's kind of revealed over halfway through that there's more than one killer. And I just love the atmosphere of this movie, and some cool kills, head twist, head chopping off, and just fun 80s slasher with just all the trimmings of a slasher, in my opinion. So check it out. Check out all these movies. House of Wax. I've heard some people say that this is like a remake of Tourist Trap. I disagree. I feel like it's a remake of House of Wax. You know why? Because it's called House of Wax. We'll start there. 2, there's a House of Wax in the movie. 3, it fucking burns down to the ground like in the original House of Wax. And there's so much from House of Wax. I don't see anything in this movie from Tourist Trap. I don't. So I don't get that comparison. But that's just me. Another movie with 2 killers, but from my memory, there's only one person doing all the killing, and the other person is only revealed to be a bad guy like halfway through the movie. So, and the one bad guy wears a creepy wax mask over his face. The kills are very slashery and brutal, and the characters are like characters out of a slasher movie. So I count it. I think it's great. Underrated movie, and one of my favorites from the 2000s. So, Freaky, the director of Happy Death Day, obviously heard the complaints for Happy Birthday or Death Day being PG-13 and said, okay, this time I'm going to give you a fresh, idea for a slasher that's not PG-13 and give you the gore and the kills in this one. And he delivered. The kills and the gore in this one are fantastic. I love Vince Vaughn and Catherine Newton's performances in this movie when they're playing both characters. They're both fantastic, and it's just a lot of fun. It's one of my favorite movies that I saw in 2020. Blood Rage, Thanksgiving slasher. I reviewed it. Check out my thoughts there. I watch it every Thanksgiving. It's the annual tradition for me now, the last 5 years since I first saw it. A lot of fun. And Thanksgiving, very recent one. Again, I reviewed it, so check out my thoughts there. This is easily the best Thanksgiving slasher after Blood Rage. That's why I put it right next to Blood Rage. Maniac, here it is. I talked about it earlier. I explained why I counted it, so won't go into that again. It's slasher enough for me, and so let's just move on. And I reviewed it. Pieces, reviewed it. Just ridiculous. Another ridiculous movie. It's one of Eli Roth's favorite slashers from the 80s. It's a must-see slasher if you're a fan of 80s slashers. And Psycho 2. Another thing. The original Psycho. Not a slasher. Exploding Heads agreed that Psycho 2 and 3 are the more slasher-esque movies of that franchise. The first one, not really. Second one, like Psycho was more like a proto-slasher, like a prototype. This one's more slashery than the other one. So, and this is my favorite after the original. This is my favorite sequel of the Psycho franchise, and I reviewed these movies back in 2019, so check out those reviews. And this is number 11. That's right. Texas Chain. I'm going to lose some people here if I haven't lost you already because I've been talking for over a fucking hour at this point. But I love this movie unashamedly. Like, I don't care what anyone says. This is not a guilty pleasure. It is a goddamn entertaining, gory, fast-paced, shocking ending of a slasher movie that just knocked me on my ass. Literal jaw drop moments at the end. I loved it. It's my second favorite in the franchise after the remake. Yeah, I like this movie just a little bit more than the original. I'm going to lose some people there too, but I don't care. I really enjoyed this movie. I've seen it like 4 times already, and it's still the same amount of awesome every time. Nothing has gotten worse on rewatch. I think this movie is just misunderstood or hated for stupid reasons. I don't get it. It's everything that you could ask for in a slasher. I love the ghost town setting. Love Leatherface in this movie. It's the scariest Leatherface since the remake. The Mask, love it. Score by the guy who did the score for Hereditary, amazing. Like every aspect of this movie I thought was just firing on all cylinders. There's not much that I hated or disliked about this movie. Like you got a bunch of, cancel culture, people getting what they deserve. Canceled. Murdered. Like how could you hate that? You know what? Maybe that's it. Maybe it's the cancel culture people who hate this movie. Maybe that's the explanation. But you know what? Fuck you. You deserve to get made fun of in the movie. I don't think they were even trying to make fun of cancel culture people in this movie. It just so happens to be cancel people getting killed. The guy on the bus, try anything and you're canceled, bro. Maybe people didn't like the humor, but I just, come on, it wasn't over the top. I thought it was just, it's amazing. I really just don't get it. Don't get the hate for this movie. Don't get it. So yeah, that's my number 11. So I'll just shout out honorable mentions. Now, these movies don't come with high praise from me. I'm saying these are movies that are maybe worth checking out that I might not be that high on. They're just like middle of the road, average, see it and judge for yourself movies. Like these are like 2.5 to 3 out of 5 movies that I think are just okay. And then I'll get to some movies that just miss my list also. So, okay, so Most Likely to Die. I'm not going to talk about these movies. Most Likely to Die. So just get like your pen and paper, write these down if you haven't seen them. So Most Likely to Die, The Final Terror, Visiting Hours, Girls' Night Out, Death Screams, Just Before Dawn, The Final Exam, Valentine, The Prowler, Don't Open Till Christmas, In a Violent Nature, and Phantom of the Mall, Eric's Revenge, Cherry Falls, what's Aquarius? What's the other Fright? Not Fright Night, Fright. What the fuck? Stage Fright. There we go. It doesn't say, so I'm trying to think of it. It doesn't say here. It says Aquarius, but the most known title is Stage Fright. And the remake of Stage Fright, I think they're both okay. Madman, The Final Girls from 2015, The Hills Run Red, New Year's Evil, Chrome Skull, Laid to Rest Part 2. I used to love Part 1, but I saw that when I was like 15. I loved it back then, but that movie has not held up. The CGI and the acting from the lead. Whew. Terror Train, Curtains, See No Evil. That's another nostalgic one, but it just hasn't held up. It's not that great, but I remember loving it as a kid. But it's a little better than the sequel. So yeah, See No Evil, See No Evil 2. Check those out. Night School, Pledge Night, and The Invitation. So those are all my like 2.5 to 3 out of 5 movies. Now here's some honorable mentions. Movies like Totally Killer from a year ago, and the original House on Sorority Row, Jack Frost, Killer Snowman movie. I think that one's a little underrated. I get that it might not be for everyone because of it's a killer snowman, so some people don't like corny shit like that, but I think it's fun. The Dentist, I kind of left that one off because it feels like Christmas Evil. It feels like just a serial killer, psychological horror movie than a slasher. I don't remember the kills being very slashery, so I kind of threw that one off last second. Silent Rage, kind of slasher-esque. It's a Chuck Norris movie, but it's got some slasher elements in it, but not enough. So I reviewed that one. Vincent Price's Madhouse from 1974. It kind of feels like a proto-slasher. It's not 100% for me. And, Butcher Baker, Nightmare Maker, Motel Hell wasn't slashery enough for me. It's two people putting people in their garden. Like, not really slashery enough. Movies like May, Dress to Kill, just didn't feel slashery enough. So, yeah. Choppy Mall. There you go. When I said earlier, unhuman, robots. No killer robots on my list. If I was counting killer robots as slasher movies, Choppy Mall would have definitely been on my list. Probably like top 25. I really like that movie. So, drink break. Top 10. Number 10 is A Nightmare on Elm Street. What can I say that hasn't been said before? Nothing. Check out my review if you want to hear my thoughts there. I reviewed the whole franchise when I first started my channel in 2018. Not the best reviews. I should probably redo them. Number 9, Silent Night, Deadly Night. Probably top 3 favorite Christmas horror movies of all time. And really looking forward to Terrifier 3, which might take that spot. I'm expecting that to definitely be one of my new Christmas favorites, hopefully. Hopefully it doesn't disappoint. Speaking of Terrifier 3, oh, no wait, Terrifier, I spoke too soon. I thought the next one was going to be Terrifier. My Bloody Valentine, I reviewed it. Check out my review. Speaking of Terrifier, there it is, Terrifier 2. Love both of them, but Terrifier 2, I think, is the much better movie. And I wasn't even that high on the first one on my first watch, but over the years, it's just I'm much more into it. But I love both, but the second one is just a much bigger movie. Literally, it is longer and bigger, more locations, more longer death sequences. The gore is better, cinematography is better, everything is better in the sequel to me. And Art the Clown is just as good as he was in the first one, if not better. So love it. Looking forward to Terrifier 3. So yeah, Terrifier 2 and 1, that's my number 7. Number 6, Sleepaway Camp. My favorite of the Sleepaway Camp franchise is the original, but I love 2 and I really like 3 also. My ranking for this franchise has changed over the years constantly, but over the last year or so, it's been the first one. This is my favorite of the trilogy, and I reviewed all the Sleepaway Camp movies that I could, because the fourth one's impossible to find as of late. A year, I think it was 2 years ago that I reviewed these movies. So check those reviews out if you want to hear my thoughts on those. And Black Christmas, my favorite Christmas horror movie of all time, is my number 4, I believe, is where we're at right now. And yeah, or maybe it's my number 5. I lost count already. What was it? Number 5, yeah, see. Number 5, Black Christmas. I reviewed this movie also back in 2018. Check that review out. I'm really trying to get through this. Number 3, Maniac Remake. Or is this number 4? I already lost count again. Maniac Remake, 10 out of 10. We are in my 10 out of 10 zone. These are all perfect slashers to me. Fucking love them. Maniac Remake is one of my favorite remakes of all time. Top 2, this one and the Evil Dead remake and The Thing. Top 3, best remakes of all time. Love Maniac. Point of view, awesome gimmick for the movie, and they do it quite well. Number 3, all right, Halloween. That's right, the original. The one that some would say started it all, but not to me, because I just put Black Christmas on the list, and that came out before Halloween. But this one definitely got the ball rolling. You know, there was a 4-year gap between Black Christmas and Halloween. There wasn't that much of a gap between Halloween and Friday the 13th. So this one kind of got the ball rolling and kind of started the blueprint, you know, for what the slasher, you know, would become. You know, kind of started the template here, and it's amazing. 10 out of 10 movie. Love it. Watch it every Halloween. It's my favorite John Carpenter movie. It's my favorite Halloween movie. It's my favorite Halloween in the, you know, Halloween movie period, like all Halloween, not just the franchise, but, you know, movies that deal with this holiday. It's my favorite. It's amazing. Number 2, Friday the 13th, the final chapter. So but like I said earlier, just all the Friday the 13th that I love, put them right here with my favorite, the final chapter, the best in the series. And by the way, it's getting re-released in theaters in September for Friday the 13th in September for the 40-year anniversary. So in case you didn't know that, that's happening. Not all theaters, but check your local theaters because it might be there. It's going to be at mine, so I'm really excited to see this movie on the big screen finally for the first time. I've only seen the first one in theaters and the remake, of course, when it came out. But yeah, really excited to check this one out in the theaters. And my number 1, what is it? What could it be? I reviewed it. It was my first horror movie that I think so. My first horror movie I ever reviewed on this channel. I reviewed the franchise not once, but twice. Hatchet. That's right. Nostalgic. Don't care. Fucking love this movie. Every time I watch it, it's still hilarious. The conversations between Ben and Marcus, the cast, the dialogue, the humor, the gore, the villain in this one, Victor Crowley, his whole backstory. Like, there's just nothing I dislike about this movie. Nothing. I mean, the only thing I could think of that some people might not like is just they're not into the humor. They want a humorless slasher. Or they think that there's too much of a gap between the opening kills and the kills after that. But that would be a complaint to me only if that whole section of the movie where there's no kills was boring. But that's not the case here. I love all the characters and the dialogue and the humor that I don't even notice that, holy shit, it's been like 35 minutes. When's the next kill? I don't care because it's that awesome. So, Hatchet, my number 1, love it. It's my favorite in the franchise. It's one of my favorite horror franchises. You know, I like all of them, and I hope there's more. I really do. You know, Adam Green, when he made Victor Crowley, he said he had ideas for 2 more movies, but this is the longest gap between movies that we've had between films. So it's been 5 years now, 6 years. So yeah, it's been the longest. So it's starting to look like it might not ever happen, but fingers crossed. Hopefully, Adam Green decides that he'll do it because he said he had the idea. So let's see it. I want more. All right, give us 2 more movies. So there you go. That's my number 1. Long video, hour and 20 minutes. This is as long as a slasher movie usually is, 80 some minutes long. Fuck. But I'm not surprised because 50 movies, that's a lot. I've never done that before. So there you go. That is my number 1 favorite slasher. But I was struggling with Friday the 13th and Halloween and Hatchet. Like those are the top 3. They could be interchangeable, but this ticks every box. And I would say Friday the 13th, especially the final chapter, does that too. But come on, the kills in this movie are not censored at all. The gore is fantastic, the kills, and it's just nudity. It checks all the boxes. It's the perfect slasher to me. This and Friday the 13th, the final chapter. So there you go. That is my number 1 again. And so what is your list? I'm curious to see if anyone even has a list. You don't have to give me your top 50. You can just say what your number 1 is. You can say what your number, top 10, top 5, condense it, do whatever you want. Do whatever. So yeah, there you go. That's all I gotta say. I don't know what the next video will come out, but it will more than likely be about the new Alien movie, Alien Romulus. Just saw that at the theater, and I'll give you my thoughts on that in the next episode. But when that will come out, I don't know. So until next time, adios, everybody. Have a good one.